Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamours have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Hi, Janelle.
Hey, Andrea.
Welcome, brave hearts, to Permission to be Human. Oh, it is Burning Man prep day for Janelle.
Yes, and you're listening to this post Burning Man for sure, but this is one of my favorite times of the year.
Yeah, she's here to get glitter and a spear crown and her outfit on.
I know, I've got a wild crown on today.
Totally, it's like an evil eye.
Yeah. Oh, no, not an evil eye. I was totally thinking of like the third eye, like I've got my vision. My vision is like this big, is how I feel it.
Sure.
And I have my unicorn mug.
You do, with your cacao.
With my cacao.
But you know, evil eye is not about evil. It's just like about scaring off spirits. Right? From
You know what? Maybe I don't even know what an evil eye is.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, evil eye is like, those little blue bracelets you get from Greece. Right, yeah. So it's not a bad thing.
There's lots of things I don't know, Bravehearts.
Oh, you betcha. There's lots of things we both don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Today we're talking about sleep. Actually, one of my most hated topics right now.
Right. I feel for you, friend.
Thank you. I think about you because I know you need a lot of sleep and you get a lot of sleep.
Mm-hmm. I've really prioritized it most of my life.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, not having kids has been a key component.
Totally. And actually, I'm pretty happy. I go into my bedroom at really no later than 9:15. This is super early.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I got that out of Costa Rica because the sun sets so early there. And that's a beautiful habit that I'm just like, wow. I'm so happy that I'm doing that because I think I used to get in bed more like 10:30. And so, but I don't get to sleep and I'm not sleeping well, but at least I'm in the bed.
Right.
In the wind down.
Are you on your phone? Are you reading?
I'm reading, I'm trying to get off my phone a little earlier, but I'm reading, I'm sitting, so okay. Winding down. So this episode is about sleep and we will begin here. In 2020, I remember Janelle telling me that her therapist, also eventually my therapist, Deborah, suggested that she sleep separately from her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yes. And because at the time, my husband and I were struggling with our intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrea, I think you actually may have been the one to mention it. Do you remember this? That I had codependent behaviors.
Vaguely. I remember thinking, learning about codependency, oh, is that what that's about?
Right. So I don't know if you mentioned it or if my friend Sophie mentioned it, but I feel like I fact-checked with my other friend Sophie, not Spirit Con Sophie, different one who's a therapist. And she was like, oh yeah, I could see that for you. And I remember being shocked, absolutely fucking shocked, that I could have codependent tendencies, but I was like, let me solve this.
What did codependent even mean to you then, though?
Codependent at the time, I think, meant someone who just was not independent. And I was someone who was independent in lots of ways, but I had to learn where the enmeshment actually took place. Mm-hmm. And it was deep.
Yeah.
But I had a hard time seeing it at first. So when I spoke to my other friend, Sophie, she actually suggested a therapist that she had seen that specializes in codependency. So I reached out right away, problem solver, Janelle on board, let's figure this out. And one of the things that she suggested was taking a break from sleeping together because it could help distinguish where, basically it would keep my energy back within me at night. Mm-hmm. And in human design, which I was a big advocate of, but one of their concepts is to sleep apart as well, because that energy leaks in the middle of the night. I'm a reflector. My husband was a generator. And so that I was really never coming into my own energy.
Okay. Got it. So it sounds like I'm hearing that you're leaking energy, you're giving energy away all night by sleeping with someone every night.
Right.
And when Janelle first mentioned this, of course, I blanched at this idea.
Yeah.
I was
which I did too, to be honest. I didn't take it like lightly either.
Right. I was just like, what do you know? Like sleep on the couch? Like what would my daughter think? Like what would my mom think? That must mean we're fighting, right? Because the traditional wisdom is that never go to bed mad, don't sleep apart, women and men sleep together, or married people sleep together.
Yeah.
This is in my head.
Yeah, agreed with everything you're saying.
So I could hear my mom's voice in my head talking about sleeping terribly when my dad wasn't there, right? And this was kind of a model for me, like, oh, you're supposed to like sleeping with your husband always. I mean, it's nothing wrong with it. She,
right.
She was just being authentic.
And I actually did like sleeping with my husband.
Right.
Right. It felt like a form of connection.
Absolutely.
Versus, yeah.
And so as we've spoken about before on another podcast, both of our grandparents slept separately. Mine slept in separate bedrooms.
Right. And mine just had twin beds in the same bedroom.
Like Donna Reed or something, like on those old black and white shows.
No reference.
No reference for you. I mean, they always slept in these separate beds. It was so weird. I'm like, why are they doing that? Clearly they had to have sex at some point to have children.
Yeah, and my grandparents had 7 children. But I will say, and they were married for 50 years. And at the time when I was young, I just thought that's something that old people did, was that they slept separately.
Yeah. So it was bizarre to me. And I remember asking my mom, like, what's up with that? And she was just like, shrugged her shoulders and didn't comment. I'm sure she had some opinions, but she didn't know. She was like, I don't know. Guess that's what they like to do. So when you suggested this, I thought, no, I can't do that. Like, it kind of just shut it down in a typical kind of anti-Braveheart fashion. Like, right? I'm like, no, that's cultural norm. Societal norm. I'm not breaking that.
Yeah.
And yet there was something in my head and my heart.
Can I just actually just pause you on that? I want to elaborate for our Bravehearts. Because as we call everyone Bravehearts, we know that we're Bravehearts, but we recognize that the journey of a Braveheart does not mean you recognize the societal norm and then you're like, yippee, let's go deconstruct that. That actually, it's like, that's weird, or that we have our own judgments, whatever it is, and I'm like, and in your case, what you're saying right now is you're like, I'm not going to sleep separately. That's what I said. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Until something, like, I pushed up against something that said, just give it a try. But that it was not an easy thing to dismantle.
Got it. Understood. Okay. Nice clarification. Because there was something in my, like, I don't know if it was my head, my heart, my gut, my pussy that said, oh, yes, that sounds nice. Like, why? Because it's easy to reflect on now. I'm not sure I could have consciously come up with these things then. But maybe I didn't want to always feel the pressure of intimacy, right? Not that it was pressure, but there's always like this thing where like, oh, are we gonna have sex? No, we're not gonna have sex. Like, or are we gonna cuddle? We're not gonna cuddle. That wasn't a bad thing, but it, in a sense, was a question mark.
Every night.
Right. I mean, in a way, like some nights you'd know like, oh, we had a stressful day, or we're going to bed at different times, or whatever. But sometimes you wonder, well, when is tonight? Are we supposed to do it tonight?
Yeah, I haven't reflected on that, but yeah, I definitely would have had that in my mind.
And then 2, I just love the idea of not being witnessed in everything I did, which we've talked about before, the value of being alone. Like, I just don't want people watching. Like, I don't mean anything bad. I'm just like,
right, yes. Or tracking, which, as we also discussed here, the tracker.
Tracking.
So I know that's the paradox. Those who are trackers don't want to be tracked, and yet those who are being tracked are like, stop fucking tracking me.
Yeah. So when we say tracking, we mean, I'm sitting on the couch with Janelle, my husband comes in. Janelle and I are completely immersed in conversation, working. He comes in, he's looking for something. And I'm like, can I help you find something? What are you looking for? Because I'm tracking him. This is what we do kind of naturally. It's another energy leak, just as a side note. So I wanted alone time, but I think also there was a lot of practical reasons. We actually like to go to sleep at different times, at that time especially. I like a fan on me at all times. I wish there was someone carrying a fan around me in my life, blowing it on me all the time, right? This would be like my dream. He is often cold and drinks hot water during the day, right? I have hot flashes, like very different constitutions. I don't mind a little light. He wants it completely black. I like to lie in bed for a while with the light on. He likes to turn it off. I am a reader. He is not. Like, there's just all these.
Like, Boudreaux and I would sleep so well together. Hey, Boudreaux.
I love it. That is so funny. I know. So I'm like, wow, we have really opposite preferences.
Oh.
So practically speaking, it was a winner. But we had just remodeled our living room. Like, we just knocked down a wall. And we only had a love seat in the living room. No guest bedroom. The fact is, it wasn't even possible for us. And emotionally speaking, I still didn't know if I could do it. But then, in amazing thrift fashion, we found the best thing ever at a garage sale in our neighborhood at the home of a family for my daughter's school. And it was this total Andrea version of the Janelle super couch.
Mm-hmm.
So you used to have a super couch at your old apartment.
Yes.
It was huge, and you had a special cushion made for it. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm. It was the size of 3 twin beds put together as one couch.
Yes, with some backs on part of it. So I found this gray IKEA super couch. It was a couch that pulled out. It was the right color. It wasn't too big for our tiny bungalow. Sold.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally.
And I think it was $50.
It was $50. I mean, 50. We probably paid $1,200 for the fucking love seat.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought it up to my husband, this idea of sleeping apart maybe one night a week. And he saw the value. And I was like, oh, it's COVID. This is the perfect excuse to tell my daughter, because we were all feeling a little suffocated at that time. And at that time, I didn't have the guts to be honest with her about, oh, this is a good model.
She was also quite young.
Yeah, that's true. So, and she, to be honest, she never really saw me sleeping on the couch. I mean, she never had a reason to ask. She wasn't up early, whatever. And, we bring this up partly because there was an article recently, it was actually reposted from a couple of years ago, so it's not a new thing. And the title was, I love you, but I don't want to sleep with you.
Mm-hmm. It was in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm. And it tells about people expressing their creative personality by having their own room that they decorate. In a marriage, a wife or a husband.
In that instance, they each had their own room.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So and about real estate developers actually creating 2 masters in a house, with potentially with Jack and Jill bathrooms.
Or ensuite bathrooms.
Yeah, or en suite.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are doing this. And it was actually disappointing, I remember, to see that the therapist in the article was like, I'm not sure I can get on board with this.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a different opinion.
Right.
I can see, of course, how it could cut down on intimacy, right? And could help you become disconnected.
It probably could go both ways. I remember that when I moved out, when we were getting divorced,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I moved, in the duplex. I moved to the other side of the duplex, and I had within the first minutes of me being in this bedroom, I was just like, oh, here I am. Here's my energy. And had the thought that, oh, I wonder, had we had separate bedrooms our entire marriage, what that would have done.
Wow, interesting.
Because it felt so actually enlivening instead of forced intimacy. I mean, obviously we never executed on this, so I have no idea how it would have played out.
Mm-hmm.
But that it's and now we're consciously choosing intimacy versus in the, should we? It's Saturday, it's been 7 days or whatever it is.
I know. I think I feel like it's, in an ideal world, it's beautiful, but it's another thing to manage, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that you don't go too long and then get disconnected, potentially, right? So I guess that would be the question.
I don't know if it's another thing to manage or you're just managing it differently.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this idea, they're talking about in the New York Times article about having separate bedrooms. Now, not everybody can afford that, or not everybody has a spare bedroom. And I hadn't thought about this in a while, because naturally, for me, when polyamory started, my husband was away 1 or 2 nights a week. It started with 1 and then, gradually got to 2. Sometimes he would come home at night, late at night. Sometimes he would stay the night. But that's when I really got the big taste of it. Because I was in my own bed next to my nightstand with my stuff in my bed, not on the couch and alone. And it was really hard at first. I mean, that was when we had like most of our Boxer conversations. Was
the witching hour. For those of you who don't know, if you're starting out in poly, like 10 to 11 p.m. can be the witching hour of like, when are they coming home? Are they coming home?
What are they doing right now? Like, what's going on? Like, yeah, it was really brutal for a while there. But then eventually,
but it's a phase. It's a phase.
It is impermanent. So I eventually really came to appreciate that. And then even when he wouldn't do it, when it was an off week or she was out of town, I was just like, oh my God, I need my alone time. How am I going to get my alone time? So I really came to crave sleeping alone. So the funny thing is that, so just going into childhood, my daughter's childhood for a minute, my daughter slept on her own as a baby. Like, we trained her to fall asleep on her own. And there was a big controversy at that time. Like, there was this whole joke about the cribs versus the beds, which is like a playoff of the Crips versus the Bloods, these gangs in LA. And so if you were a crib, you were like, make them sleep in their crib, teach them, let them cry it out. And if you were a bed, then you let the baby come into bed with you. Which of course was tough because then it's interrupting your lovemaking, right? And so we did train our child to worked it out so she fell asleep on her own. But then at some point when she was about 4, she started coming in to sleep with us. We had her sleep in the middle, her head at the end, her feet coming through us in the middle, which kind of worked. Like, we only have a queen bed, so it was a little challenging, but whatever. Like, we always had empathy for the fact that as an only child, she slept alone while we get to sleep together. That was the argument she came up with. She's like, it's not fair.
Oh.
You have someone to sleep with and I don't. I'm like, good point. But the biggest joke ever is that, like, now I wish I had my own room like she does, right? Because it would be nice to decorate it, how I wanted, or have the lights how I wanted, or whatever. So while I do find immense comfort in sleeping with him most nights, I do sometimes wish we had our own rooms. So, it's something to work out. Again, like all societal norms that we talk about bravehearts, this is just something to consider and to ask the question, like, oh, what if we didn't sleep together every night?
Right. And that this is a huge permission field. We've talked about our grandparents. Mine had separate beds in the same room. Andrea's had separate bedrooms. That's one way to do it. Andrea has a small house, doesn't have a guest bedroom. She ended up getting a couch that worked for her to sleep on. I remember when we did this experiment, it was during COVID, we actually had access. We also didn't have a guest bedroom because we lived in an apartment in downtown Denver.
Right.
But we had access to our neighbor's apartment because it was their second. Hey, Duffy.
The Duffys.
That
was a thing for a while.
Yes. So that was just like, talk about privilege. We just had access to another apartment because that wasn't their primary residence during COVID. And so we actually just walked out and down the hall. That's an unusual circumstance. But it again, we were like creative problem solving.
Yes. And we have creative problem solved now as well because my husband, who administers medicine journeys, has his office, right, with a pull-out couch. And so now, if we need some alone time, he can always sleep there. And so he did this recently. It was so nice, right? He got to just go have some alone time. So did I.
Right. And so creating if an office space can also double as a
yes, exactly.
What is that? Pied-à-terre. What's that called?
What do you say?
Pied-à-terre. It's
what
like,
is that?
I think it's like a French term for my little apartment where I go and sleep with my lovers.
Oh my God, never heard of this. Because he and his girlfriend, like, she had a separate condo that they was like a rental property for them, and so like that worked really well for them.
Right, and that's another alternative, right? Is that if you're in an open relating situation, and then one of them you could be sleeping in someone else's house.
Right. So you really can do some creative problem solving here. Obviously, you could rent an Airbnb with that. That costs some money. But I think the Goddess Temple is also an option.
Right.
Can you talk about that? Like,
yeah, I mean, if you live in Denver, the goddess temple here, we offer goddess getaways where people, and I just make it really easy. You can just like rent a room for a night, sort of Airbnb, like a la Airbnb, but
easier
because you just like send me a text and then you just come in and then you just change the sheets when you leave, and it's a sliding scale and just a room to yourself. But then you're living in community too, because I could be here. Thomas could be here. You don't know.
Share a kitchen.
Yeah.
But there's a couple different options.
Yeah. But it's a little like, hey, this is, it's a Denver staycation. So people can be in their own energy or outside of their norm for a night or two.
So let's just throw in the definition of a brave heart for any new listeners out there. Janelle, you're really good at it.
A brave heart is someone who is seeking or has found the courage to confront their fears and limiting beliefs about breaking societal norms.
So let's just delve into what we could have done to shift the energy leak or the pressured energy if I didn't have a super couch.
Or a spare bedroom or a way to sleep alone.
Right.
But I gotta say, before I even go into that, I would love just to talk about a comment that you made, which was, is intimacy going to happen tonight or not? Because I feel that and I have not reflected on this, that in my scenario, I likely was the one going to bed with the like energy of like, are we gonna have sex? Are we gonna have sex? Right? Even though we weren't for a long time. I wanted to be for a long time before. It was years before it was just like, we're not. And just turned it off. But it was like, are we? Are we? Are we?
Interesting.
And that is, so to your point, like, oh, like that's before I had a voice completely to be able to like navigate this. I mean, we were really working through it. It wasn't like this was completely unconscious, but it was how to navigate it. So let's just talk about like our bedtime routines.
Well, I'm going to ask you something about that, because how did it feel to be the woman wanting the sex when traditionally in our society there's some kind of stereotype of the opposite?
Yes. I remember listening to We Can Do Hard Things podcast, Glennon Doyle, Amanda, and Abby Wambach, and them talking, whatever they were talking about, Amanda came on and said, hey, I just want to acknowledge that what we're talking about here is the assumption that's men who want to have sex and women who don't. And she was like, I was in a relationship where it was the opposite. And so I just want to give a shout out to all the women out there, because there's a double shame.
Woot woot. Like double shame about like.
Right, because not only then are you the one who wants it, but then there's something extra wrong with you because you can't get it. And then society thinks you're also extra, like weird. Like you're not following societal norms either.
Right.
In the standard dynamic of what we say men want versus what women want.
Right.
So that was, it was hard.
That's huge. And I think it takes courage. This actually is a quote from, what's it called? I think it's called The Last Waltz. Amazing independent movie with Michelle Williams and Seth Rogen. And they say it takes courage to initiate sex. It takes courage to ask your partner about sex. And it did for me. I mean, I can't speak for everyone else, but I imagine I'm not completely alone in that. That, maybe in the early days it doesn't, right? But after you get into a routine and you haven't had sex for a while, or you're not feeling sexy, or you're going through menopause, or whatever issues you're facing, it does take courage. We talked about something 2 weeks ago that I was like, oh, I just totally did it. I'm so proud of myself for bringing that up, right?
Yay!
I'm
Good
fucking
job.
49. Like, been married since 2005. So it does take courage. And so I feel like, what can you do, I think, to alleviate it? Is it talking about it before you get in bed? Is it bringing it out into another part of your life, so it's not like the pressure of being naked next to each other staring ahead. I don't know. Like that feels like something.
Yeah.
Instead of it being this taboo topic.
Yes, I feel like we have just ventured into completely unknown territory. Because
Really?
you and I have never talked about this. This exact element of the conversation.
It's probably true. Yeah. Doesn't sound familiar.
Of being in relationship with someone and how do you navigate the intimacy and sex of the bedtime routine. Right? So this isn't like the hot date night. This is like, does someone want it and someone not?
Mm-hmm.
And you are living together, right? Versus like right now, like I'm not. I actually haven't navigated it with the version of me now to be with a lover in a routine scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not speaking from experience, but I'm speaking from an area of like, oh wow, this is juicy. I would love to hear from Bravehearts how they navigate this, because it seems to me that when I really think about wanting education and skills in the area of pleasure and intimacy, this is one of the areas of how to navigate. Like, what do we need to know? Like, is it a conversation? Is it a schedule? What works for two people? Is it, okay, if someone goes to bed early, then we're like, that's not a night for sex then, or like, there's just,
yeah, I'm kind of like deer in the headlights. Like, where do you begin? What comes to mind for me is the 3-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like these tools.
It's a 3-minute game, but that's not a conversation.
Okay, 3-minute game. I mean,
but that's you're touching.
Correct, right? And to me, like, I find this type of thing to be really helpful. Like, it's a structure that I can bring up that comes from outside of me, so it feels safer. Like, oh, I have an idea. Let's play a game. It's called the 3-minute game. And Bravehearts, if you want to find this, I think you can Google.
Yes, it's Betty Martin's work. It's Wheel of Consent. You can go to the schoolofconsent.org, and there's YouTube videos, and you can do a printout, and it's incredible skill to have. Yeah.
So I mean, I think this ventures a bit into like, how can we jazz up our sex life, right? But the 3-minute game is about touching. It's not it's not like about different positions or something. It's just about giving and receiving. But it is a way, I feel like, to become intimate slowly or reacquaint yourself with intimacy. And that is something I've experienced with my husband in the past, where it's like, oh, you know what? Like, neither of us are feeling super sexy right now. Like, I would love a massage. Like, can we just cuddle? Like, can we start there? And that's just being honest, because you have to be honest. Like, sometimes I'm feeling sexy and sometimes I'm not.
Right. But so maybe something I'm hearing is, it's still open communication required, that between two people to say, hey, where are you at tonight? Where are you at tonight? And then even if you're both in the like, oh, I'm low, and the one's low and one's higher, like feeling like they want to get it on, that you can say, okay, well, why don't we at least start with, and this, I think to your point, like a 3-minute game, where we're just trying to attune our energies to one another, and we're doing it in a container. It could be for 15 minutes, right? Like, let's just do 15 minutes of intimacy of something, and where our nervous systems are aligning. I'm like, wow, I'm like really excited someday to like practice this in real life, and then I'll report back for how it is for me. But
it is exciting, and I will say, just from a recent experience too, that it takes, I would say, being honest and being able to receive honesty
in the moment. Right? So this is an everyday practice we're talking about.
Yes. And I know 2, 5, 10 years ago, I would not have responded as well as I did recently. Like saying, oh, are you feeling sexy? Like, how are you feeling tonight? And then receiving someone saying, a partner, a boyfriend, a husband, saying, you know, I'm really not feeling sexy tonight. I'm not in the sexual energy. And not being in any way offended by that. And knowing that it is not personal. Because I get it, right? If I have been with my daughter all day, Or if I've been hanging out with family all day, I'm not in a sexual place, and there's something wrong with that. And so it takes a lot of transparency, a lot of honesty, and a lot of like staying centered and grounded when having these conversations. So I just want to put that out there that like I've practiced this and gotten better at it. And it can be still hard if you're not in a good space or in a particularly fragile space.
And recognizing, and this is come as you are. Pretty sure that's Emily Nagasaki. And she speaks to the book, in that book, she speaks about women's orgasms and talks about brakes and the brake pedals and the gas pedal. And without even talking about sex, what she's talking about are all the things that prevent a woman from actually wanting to, or being able to be relaxed. Right? So what I hear you saying is that, oh, if you've just been with your daughter all day, that you're not feeling like you want to have sex. But what if, just for example, you're like, yeah, but I would love for you to just rub my feet. And how intimate that could feel in that moment. So being able to ask for that, right? And then also to be able to receive that. And I think that there's something there as well of recognizing, oh, I do want intimacy, but it actually looks like very specific, and I know what the container is for it.
Yeah, and this just speaks to letting go of form, right? Intimacy can look so many different ways. Like, it does not have to look, even for a period of your marriage, a period of life, a period of a quarter, a period of a year. Maybe it's just feeding each other. Maybe it's just cuddling. Maybe it's foot massages.
Right.
Like,
so coming back to this episode that we're talking about on sleep, this relates to it because if you're in the same bed with someone, right, is part of the reason why you want to sleep alone, that you're like, oh, the sleep dynamic that's happening, it doesn't actually feel great all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's not, and we're going to keep talking about sleep and why we're advocates for sleeping apart a couple nights a week. But then there's all these other nights a week that you are sleeping together.
Yeah. And this is...
And how do you navigate those nights?
Right. And I think it is an ongoing conversation. And I just encourage you, Bravehearts, to be curious. Be curious. Ask questions. Ask your partner questions. Back way up and look at your bedroom. Look at where you're sleeping together. Look at the energy you're giving, and giving away and receiving. It's just something to be curious about at a minimum. Okay, Bravehearts, something to think about. Sleep, the dissection of sleep.
Yep. And then also communication around intimacy before sleep. And as always, no answers here, just ideas,
just and insights. Yeah, please follow us on Instagram. Please visit permissiontobehuman.live/events to attend an in real life Braveheart conversation at the Goddess Temple. We just hosted one. It was amazing.
And we have our next Braveheart retreat for women happening October 18th through the 20th.
Thanks, Bravehearts. We love you.
Bye.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.